countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It was hot in the city. It was hot enough to fry an egg on the backside of Ben Grimm. I was sitting in my office staring over a stack of Rom the Space Knight that I picked up in a dollar bin when it came walking in. All
a pretty lady! Sorry!
It was a tall drink of water, about 200 pages.
Would you like some water?
Came in telling a tale of woe about betrayal, mistrust, deception, and ultimately murder. I couldn't lie, there was something European about it.
I've been a pee and I've had too much water. It's really hot outside.
And a certain animal magnetism that just grabbed hold of me. So I decided to take the case. But it was that time that I remembered what my former partner J.A. Scott had told me once.
Forget it, Andy. It's just the last comic shop.
Welcome back to another week of The Last Comic Shop, and I hope you enjoyed our little film noir opening there. And as always, I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith.
Did you cut out my pretty lady voices, or did that stay in the final cut?
It was making me crack up too much. Do you want some pie?
Just like noir, the pretty ladies are always getting cut out of the picture.
That's right. Unless you're the femme fatale, then you survive the whole way most of the time. You're the one
or the gun mole. Or the gun mole.
Those gun malls. It's always about a dame in these comic books, especially when you're talking about film noir. And on today's program, we are doing another film noir comic book. This one is a particularly interesting one. It comes from J.A. Scott. It was his pick this week. It is Blacksad. It is truly something else. I mean, you talk about film noir, crime comic books, but how many times do you get a crime comic book where all the characters are animals? Keep the change, you filthy animal.
They're all animals. They're just varying degrees of filthy.
Some of them don't even look animal-like. They just got an animal face, and like the rest of them, they're definitely not drawn like any animal I've seen. J.A., why did you pick Blacksad for this week's book?
Gotten excellent reviews. It's won a couple of Eisners. It's just one of those books that everyone says you should read once in your lifetime. So we needed an independent book. We've been hitting the capes and cowls pretty hardcore for a while. So I figured let's throw up something different. Spoiler alert, I'm glad we read it. The art is just fantastic.
That's very true. I won't lie that, like, ever since our Reckless show a couple weeks ago, I've been wanting to dive back into that crime genre of comic books. So I'm glad you picked another one before the summer was out. But before we get into our comic book review this week, we've got some business to take care of. It is time to recap some of our polls. As you may or may not know, and hopefully you do know, every Wednesday on our Twitter page at Last Comic Shop, J.A. Scott is wonderful enough to put out a poll to all of our listeners. It usually dovetails very nicely with the book that we're reviewing that week. And as promised, we like to then come on to these programs periodically and tell you what the results were. So we've got about 5 polls, I think, starting off mid to late June.
So we looked at the book Superman vs. Spider-Man. So the poll that week was the best versus, or the best matchup. And there were several to choose from. Superman versus Muhammad Ali, Batman versus the Hulk, JLA versus the Avengers, and Aliens versus Predator, which many people might not know was actually a comic book before it was anything else. That being said, it didn't get a lot of votes. Neither did Superman versus Muhammad Ali. Batman versus the Hulk and JLA versus the Avengers were both sort of tied for the top spot on that one. Surprising to me. I thought JLA versus the Avengers would have gotten a little bit more interest than it did.
And I think the best choice was left off, and I think somebody else brought this up. Best intercompany versus is the Teen Titans versus the X-Men. It had the art, it had the story. It's not even one of the best crossovers, one of the best comic books, bar none.
Yeah, I remember back when we reviewed Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, that was your recommendation. So if you want to hear a little bit more about that particular book, go back and listen to that episode. You can hear Chad's recommendation at the end of the episode for that particular versus. And it actually came in the same comic book collection as Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man, if you can still find that trade out at your local comic book shop. I know that I particularly voted for Batman versus the Hulk because it's one of my favorites. Again, I talk about it all the time, that awesome scene where Hulk throws a car at Batman and he jumps through the window, somehow saving himself miraculously. But it's also got some other cool stuff, including the fact that Joker gets godlike powers in that long before the Emperor Joker and all that other stuff ever happened. So, like, it's a cool book. J.A., what was your vote in that one?
I voted for Aliens versus Predator because I'm a big Dark Horse fan.
Well, I mean, and I actually was thinking that was going to get a little more votes than it actually did. I mean, I thought that a lot of people know those movies, and I just thought that they would have voted for that particular.
I think in this case, the movies actually took away the votes.
Yeah,
the movies are so bad that they brought that vote down. Where you, with your cheating Batman versus Hulk comic book panel of Batman jumping through the car window, actually elevated Batman versus Hulk above what he should have. He was punching above his weight, if Hulk can punch above his weight.
What I was really surprised, though, nobody was voting for Superman versus Muhammad Ali, because it is a classic. With the scrubs.
The art is beautiful. Makes me want to go out boxing.
That scene where Muhammad Ali punches Superman out of the ring, gorgeous.
So the next poll was in honor of the July 4th weekend and our Captain America book. Who is the best Captain non-America? So we had Captain Marvel from Marvel, Captain Marvel from DC, Captain Britain, or Captain Canuck. Spoiler alert, Captain Canuck, not so many votes.
Oh, I was trying to think of who Captain Canuck was, actually. Immediately I thought of, like, oh, was he on Alpha Flight or something? But that's the Vindicator, right? That's the
Guardian,
Captain America version for Canada, right? Is Vindicator.
You're both right. It's Vindicator and Guardian.
Oh, okay. But who's Captain Canuck?
He's another Canadian superhero from the Marvel, not well known.
Well, who won this one if it wasn't Captain Canuck?
Captain Marvel DC, so
Okay.
Shazam.
There we go. Captain Shazam.
No, that was who I voted for. If of all those captains that you named, I'm going with Shazam every single time. I've always loved Shazam much more than Superman. I'm a bigger fan of him. I think it's kind of cool that he has the Billy Batson alter ego and that kind of wish fulfillment.
Which movie did you like better then? Between the Captain Marvel and the Captain Marvel.
Ooh, I think I actually enjoyed the Shazam movie more. I think that had a lot more fun. Especially at the end when, sure, there were just a bunch of demons running around, but it was really cool to see the kids get the superpowers. And again, that wish fulfillment, like comic books are supposed to be for kids. So for kids to get like empowered and be like, yeah, I'm going to go beat up some random monsters.
I remember thinking that movie was like 65% awesome. As long as it wasn't dealing with the villains, it was great. Whereas Captain Marvel, I was like, okay, it's happening.
All right, what's our next poll recap?
The next one was also a bit of a landslide, much to your chagrin. Best indie superhero film. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the 1990 version. The Crow. Flash Gordon, the 1980 movie. And The Shadow. I'll go out on a limb on this one. It was Cowabunga, man.
I remember seeing that in the movie theater with UJA. Like, it was so packed that we ended up having to sit in like the front row, and luckily we got two seats together. But I just remember, like, it was the biggest thing ever. Like, we talked about it for like months. We were like, oh, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie's coming out. Oh, it's going to be great. Chad, did you see that one in the theaters as well?
I did, but that wasn't even the best Ninja Turtles movie. It was Ninja Turtles 2, Secrets of the Ooze. That's your best Ninja Turtles movie.
Oh, because it's got the Vanilla Ice in it?
Oh, yeah.
Go Ninja, go Ninja, go. Go Ninja, go Ninja, go.
Well, I went with The Shadow because I love that movie. It's on HBO Max if you ever want to watch it. There's everybody in that movie. Magneto's in that movie, and Tim Curry, and Alec Baldwin.
I would say the only issue I have with the Shadow is some of that CGI doesn't quite hold up anymore. Some of the special effects are not nearly as special as we once thought they were. that knife with the animated face.
Oh, but they had a lot of great practical effects in it, like, that bathysphere scene where he's, like, drowning and whatever, and all the cool, like, little miniatures that they did with, like, the swooping around buildings. It's cool.
Once again, you remember way too much about movies from 35 years ago.
We're running a podcast. That's my job. What's our next poll?
Best superpower. Flying, super strength, energy projection, or lockpicking. Apparently not a lot of listeners care about breaking into houses.
Oh, but see, that's every single time you play any sort of RPG, that's like the one skill you always have to get is lockpicking. That and like some sort of hacking skill. Because you always need it. You're like, I got to break into this thing and steal the treasures. It's the only way I'm going to get the equipment I need. So useful, but you're right. It's not a really great superpower. Chad, what was your pick in this one?
I think I went flight, but honestly, I feel like if flying was like running, like if you could fly at the same rate that you ran somewhere, it would be practically useless. Yeah, I flew 3 miles to the store, and now I need to sit down for a day.
Well, it's not like you're flapping your arms or something. Like,
well, why not? That's what birds do.
You'd have such massive delts, and you'd be able to tell so many terrible jokes. Oh, I just flew in from Albuquerque, and boy, are my arms tired.
Flying took top prize, by the way. As I said, no one went with lockpicking, so it was really a 3-horse race.
All right, what was our last poll?
And our last poll, best 1980s detective.
Ooh, this one was real tight. This one came out about the same time as we did Reckless, our last crime noir comic book. So what were the choices there? Thomas
Magnum from Magnum PI, Rick Hunter from Hunter, Fred Dryer, the ex-NFL, Jessica Fletcher, and Remington Steele.
See, I voted for Pierce Brosnan. I loved Remington Steele back in the day. It was one of my favorite shows. Every single title had Steele in the name. It was the best. Coffee, tea, or Steel. Steel Trap.
I was tempted to go Hunter because I used to watch that with my grandma, but ultimately I went with the Magnum. Also that I watched with my grandma.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with Thomas Magnum and Magnum PI.
Wait a second. You went against your Fred Dryer? Your precious Fred Dryer? You didn't even vote for him? You know what? I was surprised there was as many Jessica Fletchers out there. They seem to come out of the woodwork, those Jessica Fletcher fans. Murder, She Wrote evidently has a tremendous fan base, and don't mess with
you don't mess with Angela Lansbury, man. She comes after you.
Well, who won this one? It was close.
Magnum did. Magnum 38% to Remington Steele's 35%.
Wow. Ooh. Only 3%. Jeez.
And it was our most, up until that point, our most voted on poll, too.
Oh, so there you go.
We hit a chord.
And there were some good suggestions of folks we didn't remember. Somebody recommended Simon and Simon. There was a Hardcastle and McCormick. I was surprised nobody suggested Columbo. I was just out,
He's not 80s because I was going to put him down, but Columbo came out in the 70s.
What about the Perry Mason?
Also, too young.
What about the Scarecrow and Mrs. King? Or they were actually super spies, I guess. I don't know.
Yes.
Would Knight Rider count?
Yeah.
He's not really a detective / private investigator. He's more of a, man of leisure who has a car.
All right. We're getting into subgenres here. And one subgenre we're going to get to in just a second is our crime-related comic books and Blacksad. Make sure that you go check us out every Wednesday for our weekly polls at Last Comic Shop on Twitter. And we'll be right back after these messages.
Cartoon Dumpster Dive.
I'm your host, Joel.
And I'm your host, Andrew. Join us as we travel back in time to watch the garbage cartoons from your past. Will you remember them? Maybe.
We painstakingly watch every episode of these cartoons to remind you that, hey, some things belong in the past.
Our pain is your entertainment. Thanks for tuning in.
Get ready for the new sitcom, Falls a Crown. Everything was coming up roses for Bradley and Cameron until...
I could just lie here with you forever.
I think we should see other people.
And as if that wasn't tragic enough...
The rent is going up higher than annual passes at Disney World.
But they have a plan.
Turning this place into a brothel.
You could get a roommate.
Enter Allison and Dylan.
Your endless sexual escapades.
Whole new meaning to home office.
Join these 30-somethings as they face the challenges of balancing careers and dating after 29. Coming soon to a podcatcher near you. 1, 2, 3, Falls a Crown.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time to do our Read Pile Review, which we oftentimes are famous for, sometimes infamous for, but hopefully everybody comes away from our Read Piles with a better understanding of comic books and something that they might want to check out at their local comic book shop if they are so inclined. And this one in particular this week, I can say I would recommend.
Spoilers, come on, man.
I can't keep a poker face for this. I enjoyed it. Especially as J.A. alluded to earlier in the show, the art was just absolutely tremendous. It is Blacksad. And Chad, who did Blacksad?
Okay, so we're going to be reviewing the first 3 books of Blacksad. Were written by Juan Diaz Canales and illustrated by Juanjo Garnido, with lettering by Studio Cutie.
This particular collection that we're reading today was released by Dark Horse Comics. Originally, this was a foreign language comic, so it has been translated and adapted into English, which is what we're reviewing today. I can say I think it originally came out in the mid 2000s.
Yep, 2000 to 2005 in France.
Okay. And then it eventually made it across to our shores, I think, in 2010. And as always, with a good crime drama, there has to be a good story, a hook. And in this case, you get, I guess, 3. So J.A. might give us 3 10-cent synopsises, or he might just give us 1. But generally, J.A., what was Blacksad all about?
So Blacksad is a noir comic book series with anthropomorphic animals instead of people. And Blacksad, the titular character, is a private investigator that is a cat. So it's sort of, imagine if all the little kids from Sweet Tooth grew up and populated the world. That's what it is. They're all running around.
I was going to say it was more like an R-rated version of Zootopia. For those folks that might enjoy that Walt Disney movie. It's like, if you want to see, I don't know, sexy Judy Hopps, you can read Blacksad instead, because that's what they're kind of sort of doing with this book.
And I was going to get to this later, but they're only animals from the neck up.
They've got fur.
Fur and tails, but otherwise they have very human anatomies.
Yes.
Are often on display.
That is very true. At times, a furry's wet dream in this particular book. Won't lie about that. But as Chad alluded to, there's actually 3 stories in the particular volume that we did. J.A., can you give us a really quick rundown of the 3 stories and what happens in each of them without giving too much away?
So these stories all take place in the 1950s in the United States. First book was translated Somewhere Within the Shadows. Blacksad is investigating the murder of a famous actress that he used to once date. So, it's a classic noir tale of an investigator going through his past to figure out what happened to someone he used to love. And at the same time that he's investigating her murder, he's sort of retreading all the problems that led to their breakup. And like any classic film noir, when it ends, everyone is dead or sad.
Okay. Then the second book...
The second book, Arctic Nation, tells a story of white power movement. So there's a anagram to the KKK, and they're animals that all are polar. So they're all white fur animals, like the polar bear and the sea otter and things. And they're trying to build a society where the only people who have power and are going around are other white-furred animals. And so we'll talk about this, because I think, Chad, you said that you had a little bit of trouble with that one. But essentially, economic depression and race relations, and also there's a bit of perversion thrown in because it's noir, and there's a bit of sexual repression and stuff like that, and all centers around the kidnapping of a girl. And then the final story you read is Red Soul, which kind of an allusion to sort of the Red Scare and McCarthyism in the 50s, and Blacksad is a bodyguard, and he gets drawn into this convoluted story about the scientists and the H-bomb, and there's this woman that he's trying to date, and she wants to go to Niagara Falls, and there's some artwork, and somebody who is an allegory to Joe McCarthy.
All right. Well, that's a good enough 10-cent synopsis, because, again, you don't want to give away the mystery of most of these stories. There is a mystery that plays a part, again, like in any good crime noir story. So we don't want to give too much away so that you can enjoy it as you're reading it as well. But we're going to get the initial thoughts, and those come from Chad Smith, especially since he said that, in terms of this particular book, the first book was almost like the best one for you, Chad, and then kind of diminished returns from there.
The first book in this series, the Somewhere Within the Shadows, I thought this was great crime noir. Like, it had everything. It starts off, where he shows up, ex-girlfriend has been murdered. He goes back to the flashbacks, and he's hunting down people, and so much in here that was just fun crime noir, only with these anthropomorphized what I refer to as the Silver Age Disney animals. Like whenever you get to Jungle Book and the Robin Hood, when the animation got a little bit sketchier for Disney, like that's what I felt like all the characters' faces looked like, were their foxes. And also was weirdly sexy. Like this book, where there are times where it's like, these are animals, but wow. But that part was just fun, and there are people coming after him, and the guy has the snake head. Like, that was really cool to watch. And then
actually, it was like a common theme throughout the entire series of books, like the hitmen and things. They were all like more reptilian in nature, like they were snakes or turtles or crocodiles and stuff.
Yeah, they were cold-blooded. They had that bar. The cold-blooded bar where the one, I don't know if it was a rat or a ferret, was trying to come after Blacksad, and walks into this bar, and like, no hairy people like you in here, and all these cold-blooded animals stare at him.
Yeah. It was neat, though, because it seemed like, as an aside, every single time that they got a character, like they found an animal that perfectly fit that character's personality. Like, I mean, they had bruisers that were giant bears or rhinoceroses, and of course that's kind of like, again, your allusion to Robin Hood. But I was kind of like, yeah, these all make sense. Even Blacksad being the panther from the Jungle Book, that's what Blacksad looks like. He's just like a much more muscular version of it.
But yeah, so I thought that all worked in this first book really well. And I was like, wow, I really like this. It's a little strange. The art is beautiful. When I got to the second story, The Arctic Nation, which was occurring in what I assume to be the American South, what got me was all the white animals are Arctic, like polar bears. That doesn't work. Like, it just, there was something about it that pulled me out of like this mix of animals in this story. And then there's some weird stuff that happens. I'm going to spoil a bunch of this. So if you want to tune out for the next 30 seconds and skip ahead. But the bad guy ends up marrying his daughter. So weird and so gross. Why do these characters have to be animals? I feel like this story would have benefited almost with it not being these animal characters, because all the animal part did was just take me out of it and just add an extra level of weird. But with that said, art is art, and if the artists were like, I want to make cats and panthers and bears, oh my, like that second story took me out of it. By the time I got to the third story, it didn't pull me back into understanding what the justification was there for the anthropomorphized animals.
Well, I think it makes you remember the stories. It makes them that much more memorable. And I think that's why that middle story is harder to digest, because it's really slamming up against sort of some uncommon truths. There's the black and the white does. I guess they're does. You're kind of confused because they look like sexy women, except they've got ears and tails, and how am I supposed to handle this and deal with this? And at the same time, you're working through what the story is trying to tell you. I think that's what adds to the power of it. Because if it was just a normal human story with human characters, it would just be this, that's your sort of typical noir fare that's weird and has, sexual deviancy and all this other stuff. But now you've got it with animals, so it's a whole nother level of...
I kind of agreed with the second story because, again, for all intents and purposes, it's kind of like Chinatown. Chinatown has a very strange kind of sexuality thing going on. If you've ever watched that particular movie with daughters and fathers and all that other stuff, and this is very similar to that. So I feel like if it had not been done with just animals, if it had just been another, bunch of humans, I would have just been like, that was just a ripoff of Chinatown, and I've seen that already. But with the animals, again, it allows the author, I feel, to tell certain like hard truths with this kind of sheen over top that you're like, okay, they're animals, so we can have a little bit of distance from these really kind of uncomfortable topics, right?
See, I think the animal, it was just a metaphor that didn't need to be there. And then I'm like, well, why are the bears palling around with these animals? Like, they're natural predators, and like the combinations didn't make sense to me. And then like, I'm worried about that when meanwhile there's this weird story of perversion and all this other stuff going on.
One thing that you never see in these anthropomorphized comics is there's never insects. They get the short shrift.
That's true. There were bugs, but they were stapled to the collector's
right.
book.
They were normal sized bugs, and the guy was putting pins through them. Wouldn't that be murder if you're in an anthropomorphized world?
Yeah,
Still
wouldn't
murder.
those wouldn't they just be lunch? Like, that was the thing. Like, you never see them eat. Like, would the herbivores be eating like grass at like a grass bar or something? Like big piles of lettuce and stuff?
Yeah, I would say the second story holds up the best when you sit down and reevaluate everything. The first one I felt sucked you in immediately, and within a page, you're in the environment. The third book, there was just so much going on, I felt. The Red Soul story, because it has all these characters that allude to real characters in life. You've got McCarthy, you've got Allen Ginsberg, you've got Rothko, you've got all these real people who have anagram within the story. It's harder to read if you don't know who those people are. To me, that took me out of the story a bit, because I felt like, I've got to go look up Wikipedia. Isn't that from Howl? And who are they trying to have him be?
Now, I like that third story the most, just from an artistic perspective, just simply because I felt like it had a lot of Easter eggs. Like, the story, there's paintings involved and whatever. That all kind of lost me, and I was paying more attention to like, they drew Adolf Hitler like a cat, because that's what they did in Mouse. And I was like, yay! I know some things. Like, they made the Nazis look like cats, just like in Mouse. I was like, all right. But I will agree that, like, the second story for me was my favorite. It had a lot of twists and turns, and I kind of really liked Weekly, his sidekick that's introduced in that one, as kind of like he's a ferret or a weasel, something like that. But he works as a tabloid person, and he's kind of like that Scoops, that news hound kind of character that always should appear in some sort of crime noir as a good friend of the private detective, give him that little bit more information. But yeah, I found myself trying to compare this book to anything else that I'd ever read before. And it actually was really hard, and I think it was because of the animals. That animal factor threw me for such a loop, and it was very cinematic in the way that it was drawn. And you could see this being like scenes in a film.
I was going to say cinematic, I would agree with, but not realistic. Like, animals don't emote like that. Like, think of the live action Lion King movie. The problem is, animals don't show Disney style emotions. And so you just had animals with these dead stares looking into the camera. And so
it seemed like Blacksad got all the great romance scenes too. Like in Red Souls, when after he saves her from some FBI agents, like they're hiding out together, and that's not my style, and they have this really passionate kiss, and I got the feels. Like, I was like,
So in that second book, what did you think of the fact that they were doing it doggy style? The dog was doing it doggy style.
I won't lie. There were certain scenes in this thing I was like, this is a little hot.
There's certain scenes I turn the page and then look around, make sure that my kids aren't close.
I know. Yeah. He's like peeking through the window and she's getting railed from behind. I was just like, oh my God. But it's true to life. It's true to form. Everybody just looked the way that they were supposed to, and it just brought a certain level to this book that is unlike anything else I've read. And that's good art.
Yeah, and I think Chad mentioned it. It does feel a bit sort of like those Disney films of an earlier era, the Jungle Books, the Robin Hoods, where every character, the animal that they are, fits them perfectly in personality. And I think it's that because that's the personality that we've imbued in some of these animals. So, like reptiles and lizards and cold-blooded animals are the underworld, and you've got a rat is the spy on the street going around, and then the police chief is a German Shepherd.
Yeah, don't forget the canine cop.
Again, and between the animals and whether it was the romance scenes or the fight scenes, every action scene was just gorgeous to look at. There's one scene where Blacksad crushes these two goons with a fire extinguisher. Boy, was that awesome to look at. It was you could feel the teeth just rattle out of these animals' faces when he cracks them, because they did a number on him earlier, so he's getting a little bit of revenge with getting the jump on these two guys. Whether it's some of the gunplay. I mean, Blacksad is, again, very much like Ethan Reckless from the Reckless book. He is capable of handling this situation. So very classic in terms of what you want a hero in one of these crime noirs where he can really handle his own business.
So much of that is conveyed through the art. It came through in the eyes of the characters, the way they looked at each other or glared at each other or they snarled, or, there's that one scene at the end with the smirk. This artist is just incredible in terms of how much he emotes.
And the colors are just beautiful. The whole thing has this really muted sheen. There are a lot of browns and ambers used. I mean, even Blacksad, he's black, but he doesn't, it's not like a harsh black color. It's almost like the whole thing was done with pastels or watercolors with a really light touch. I think the color really brings out the art. Had they done it with a more vibrant color palette, it wouldn't have worked. It would have been sort of jarring. So it feels like, like neo-noir films or early colorized film noir where the colors are very muted, as opposed to, say, like the Dick Tracy movie where everything is really shouting.
Right, no, for sure. And it suits the scene, and it goes back and forth sometimes between scenes where it'll be, those blues, and then it'll go to the oranges or the ambers, and it fits the scene that it's portraying beautifully. I totally agree with the colors. Good call on that one.
And if you want to hear more of our good calls on things, make sure that you stick around after these commercial breaks for our rating of Blacksad. Will it be a good call? Will it be a bad call? We'll see. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Two Girls on a Bench, the podcast. So we're two writers who tend to procrastinate just a bit.
We like to snack. We like to talk.
We don't have time to write, but we have time to do this podcast.
We certainly do. Join us on the bench.
Listen in.
At number 2 Girls on a Bench.
Hey, this is 10M.
Padawan J.
Coach Duffy. From the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour podcast. Every week, the ODPH is talking sports, movies, TV, comics, and more. It's always a parlay of topics on each episode. You can find the ODPH on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and wherever you find great podcasts, such as the one you're listening to right now. Don't forget to check out OchoDuroParlayHour.com, where you can find the links to all of the ODPH social media accounts, links to the bands whose music you hear each week on the show, hashtag 607 podcast info, and parlay points, our companion blog section of the show. Thanks for listening to the ODPH. Now get back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop. It is now time for our rating. where we have an opportunity, regardless of which part of the Atlantic you're from, we're going to say, hey, you made a comic book, and we are going to give it a numerical value, because that's what our show's all about. At the end of the day, we got to give it some sort of rating and say, hey, is this worth our fans checking out at their local comic book shop? So, J.A., what is our rating scale for this week?
Okay, we're going to go 1 out of 4 cat treats. So how much catnip did you like?
Speaking of cat treats, it was your book, so was this a cat treat for you, J.A.?
Yeah, I say it's about 3.5 cat treats. I'm going to ding it down a little bit because I felt that, especially in Red Soul, the story got a little convoluted. They were trying too much with the Easter eggs and putting people into the background that didn't necessarily add to the story, but I felt that the main plot, it was a collection of subplots. That third book, that's how I'll say it. Unlike the first 2 books where you had a main story that kind of drove everything, in the third story I felt it was just a lot of subplots that they kind of threw together and hoped that it stuck together long enough that it propelled the story forward, but there wasn't this driving engine the way you had in the first 2 stories. I really enjoyed, as we've gushed about the art already, and the writing. Oftentimes you'll see comic books written for another culture in another language. They don't translate quite so well because this was originally written in French and then put into Spanish and then translated from the French probably into other languages and English as well. But I think it works.
Okay. Chad, how many cat treats are you giving it?
Because the art is beautiful and at the same time it's unnerving, because I love those old Disney movies and I don't want to see somebody with, a Disney face railing some other doe-eyed animal from behind. It unnerved me, I won't lie. And then to find out that it was, the relation and so much on it unnerved me. But I thought the first part was really good. It's like I said, the second one just weirded me out, and the third one never got me back in. So I'm going to say 3.5. The art is beautiful, and I almost forgot reading it that it was translated because I didn't notice any blips or anything that, things that would be lost in translation. But yeah, there were just some parts that didn't do it for me.
Okay. I think I'm going to give this a 3.5 as well. I can't give it a full 4 just simply because the first story was very straightforward, to the point. It was your traditional crime noir murder mystery. The second one, a lot of interesting stuff going on there. But again, it started to kind of push the envelope on how much they wanted to do with the plot. They kind of started throwing in some additional subplots that maybe not panned out very well. The third plot with Red Souls, J.A. said there was a lot of subplots that kind of were out there and hopefully like gelled enough into a story. I kind of felt like that's kind of the way real life is, where again, in a fictional story, you do have like a main plot that drives things. In real life, you just got a lot of messy subplots of a lot of folks that have different agendas kind of overlapping each other. But to that point, it doesn't make it a good story. In some ways, although you want things to be true to life, sometimes it pushes the envelope too much, and you're like, yeah, I didn't need that Dalmatian signing up to something because he was afraid that he was going to get blown up in an atom bomb explosion. It was real weird. And it was really strange to see him like digging in the desert with like a shovel. Like that was like the desperation on this mad Dalmatian's face. I was like Pongo on, I don't know, crack or something. It was I think the most unnerving character in the entire series. But that being said, it's art. That's the one thing that is wonderful about sometimes European comics. We've mentioned it before that unfortunately in the 1950s, you had the seduction of the innocent and kind of comic books as an art form were kind of put on hold for a while. Like we almost lost like 2 or 3 decades worth of potential progress that we could make with comic books as an art form. That didn't happen in Europe. So you had a lot of European comics that continue to push the envelope, European artists that continue to push the envelope. And Blacksad is just another example of folks in that area of the world that are pushing the envelope on what you can do with the comic medium. And the fact that he made them all anthropomorphic animals, if they had just done this without that, I think this would have been largely forgettable. Maybe some of the action scenes would have been neat to see, but that animal thing just kind of puts it right over the edge and turns it from something that's just a standard crime noir story into something that really should be checked out by anybody out there. This is not for kids, even though it's got a bunch of animals in it. Keep this away from the kids. But if you're an adult and you enjoy good crime comic books, pick up Blacksad. Read it. It's a recommendation from me. And speaking of recommendations, it is now time for that part of the show where we like to give you other things that you can find at local comic book shops in your area.
Yep. We like to take something similar, something recent, and something maybe a little bit out of left field or off the beaten path. So this week, what is coming out of left field?
I've got the left field pick this week, and it does have some characters that are technically animals because they're humans, but they also have animals in their names. It is Batman 66 meets the Green Hornet. This was a co-production by DC Comics and Dynamite. It was released back in 2015. It was done by a name everybody should know out there, Kevin Smith. If you don't know him as the film director, he's also done a lot of comic books, whether that's been, I think he had a Daredevil run. He also did Green Hornet, as well as, I believe he did some Batman.
A little bit of Batman. He had a good Green Arrow run.
Yes.
Back in the day.
So he's done a lot of comic books. In this particular story, he works with Ralph Garman and Ty Templeton on art. And basically it is just almost like a shot-for-shot remake of what would happen if you had the Batman 66 TV character meet the Green Hornet TV character from about that same era. Both of those shows were put out by similar production companies. They have a similar feel, although Batman 66 is a little bit more campy compared to the Green Hornet, which was a little more kind of serious in terms of the crime drama. But you've got all the classic characters there. You've got the Adam West Batman. You've got the Burt Ward Robin. You've got the Van Johnson Green Hornet. And you've got Bruce Lee as Kato. It really is a tremendous story over 6 issues where the Green Hornet and Batman, although they're on opposite sides of the law, the Green Hornet's playing that angle where he's the quote-unquote crime boss that's trying to take down other criminals that stand in his way while actually being the good guy. But they join forces to stop the Joker, played by Cesar Romero, and General Gum, who is kind of a newbie character on the scenes who uses a lot of glue-based powers to try to stop the dynamic duo and the Green Hornet in their tracks. But it's just tremendous in regards to the fact that if you like these TV shows, here's almost like an unaired version of it with all of the same campiness and wonderful dialogue and death-defying escapes and just good characterization. So, yeah, if you're a fan of those shows, pick up this book. It's not exactly crime noir, but these are the closest we're going to get in terms of crime noir superheroes, to be honest.
So when they get into fights, so the big pows and zapat, wham!
I actually, I don't think there's as many much as that, but they do have, the Bat-Zuka shows up in one of the scenes. They do scale the wall sideways. They even have Richard Nixon come out of the window as a cameo like they would do on the Batman 66 show. I won't lie, I picked it up because Chad recommended it to me. He read it first and said it was really good, so I had to check it out. But Chad, what is your recommendation for this week?
Before we go on, I want to say you're underselling the Alex Ross covers on that. Alex Ross and Mike Allred. There's so many great covers in that series. That one was lots of fun. But for my recommendation, I'm going to go with the something similar pick. Is going to be another crime noir series. I'm going to start with Volume 1 from Richard Stark's Parker, The Hunter by Darwin Cook, where he took the original novels that were written by Richard Stark, a.k.a. Donald Westlake, and translated them into comic book form. And if you're familiar with Darwin Cook's work, he's a master of the comic book craft, but he also has that very hyper-stylized 50s era art that really suits this genre. And this book, it's just a masterpiece. It's told in black and white with like a tealish blue accent color, and that's all you'll see color-wise throughout the series. But it has everything you want in a crime noir story. It has dames, it has the criminal who had a job gone wrong, and now the people are double-crossing him, and he's double-crossing them, and he's going through his old connections to hunt people down, and it's so much fun. If you have not checked out the Parker novels by Darwin Cook, I highly recommend them. It's crime noir at its best.
Do you know how many books are in that series, Chad?
So there are 4, which I realize I don't have the 4th one yet. I have the Hunter, I have the Outfit, I have the Score. I need to pick up Slayground still. But I'll be hunting that down at my local comic shop. But we have more recommendations, don't we?
Yeah.
So this is something recent, also related as well, but the 2016 graphic novel adaptation of James Elroy's The Black Dahlia. So this was done by acclaimed storyteller Matz and award-winning filmmaker David Fincher, who you might know from Gone Girl and Zodiac and a bunch of other movies. So they worked to take Elroy's novel and convert it to graphic novel form with beautiful art by Miles Hyman. Very similar color palette to Blacksad that we just talked about, sort of those muted neo-noir movies from the 1960s and 70s, not unlike a David Fincher movie, to be honest. Washed out look. And this tells the story, of course, of the Black Dahlia, LAPD investigating the mysterious and brutal murder of a young woman and their obsession to solve the murder and all the dark turns and you know, sort of the gritty underworld around Hollywood, what happens when you get obsessed with something and how it can destroy you and turn you in from this shining beacon of hope to a bitter, twisted, dark person. It's really well done. It's great to see somebody take a really well done novel, turn it into a graphic novel, and both preserve and go beyond what the original book could do. It's available on Comixology Unlimited. If you have a subscription to Comixology, you can download it today. Good page turner.
All right. Well, as always, we hope to fill your comic book shelves with tons of page turners, and we do that every single week. And you can follow along with our adventures by rate, reviewing, and subscribing to any of the myriad of places that you can find our wonderful podcasts. And you can do that by going out to www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. We've got links to Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all of the other places where you can, again, rate, review, and subscribe. And we would really love that if you like our show, if you're big supporters of what we do, leave us that 5-star review. Tell us how much you enjoy our show, because it's those words of encouragement, those words of support that mean all the difference to us. It's what keeps us going every single week. So say something nice if you like us. We'd appreciate it.
All right. If you are interested in continuing the conversation about some of the books we've talked about, you can follow us on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, you can find us at Last Comic Shop, and on Facebook, it's at Last Comic Shop Podcast.
And all those links are on our website, along with a link to our merch store, where this week you can get a trench coat or two, so you can be your own favorite detective.
Yeah.
We've got great T-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs. We're always putting out new designs, so make sure you check it out. Every time we put out a new design, there's usually a discount on those things. So get your merch on and enjoy wearing some new clothing.
There you go. Unlike some of the characters in these stories that tend to not do that thing. All right, but once you've gotten your merch, you can take some of your extra cash and head down to your local comic shop, because while we may be the last comic shop podcast, we don't want to actually be the last comic shop. So you can go to www.comicshoplocator.com and find a place near you where you might pick up things like Blacksad You might pick up something like Batman 66 versus the Green Hornet. You might find a copy of Black Dahlia or some of the Richard Stark's Parker the Hunter novels from Darwin Cook. All that and more awaits at your local comic shop, so don't wait. Check it out while you can.
Yes. And make sure that you check us out every single week at the last comic shop. I was the host with the most, Andy Larson, and I was joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith. And as always, stay safe, stay sheltered. And remember, Blacksad works 40% of the time, all the time. Like some other Sex Panthers we know.
Oh, that's so bad.
Yikes.
Oh, it smells like a diaper filled with Indian food.
That being said, Paul Rudd would probably do a good job as Blacksad. If they made the Blacksad movie, would you want them to be as weirdly looking as the